God, am I ready to never talk about 2020 again. 2020 sucked, and I'm praying 2021 will be better, but so far it's really not looking very hopeful at all. Due to cinemas closing early on in the year, we got very little in the way of movies last year. Of course, streaming service originals still happened, but most of the big movies that I personally was looking forward to ended up being postponed. But despite that, we did still get some great stuff. As always, I'm counting films that got a 2020 release in the UK, so films that got 2019 festival screenings or were released in other countries in 2019 but didn't get a proper UK release until 2020 will be counted on the list, and because of that there will be films that came out in some places in 2020 and didn't come out until 2021 in the UK that won't be on here. So films like Promising Young Women that's like getting acclaim from everyone, that's not on the list because I can't see it. This just gives me a chance to talk about films that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to talk about. So let's jump into my top 30 best films of 2020. Yep, instead of 20, I'm doing 30 this year, so I'll try not to take up too much time. At number 30, we have Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, directed by George C. Wolfe. Based on August Wilson's play about the mother of blues, this film is a dramatized version of a tumultuous recording session in 1927 Chicago. Visually, the film isn't anything very special. I do think the first act is especially pretty obnoxiously edited and shot, but what makes this film worth watching is the fantastic writing and of course standout performances from Viola Davis and Chadwick Boseman. Both Davis and Boseman completely transform into their respective characters and deliver career best performances, especially Boseman, who is absolutely at the top of his game. It's fitting that this was his final film performance as he's really great in this film. The costumes and production design are also really great, creating a really authentic 20s feel, but at its core this film does a really good job of creating something that feels like a stage play. The minimal amount of locations, the long monologues, all these parts create something that feels theatrical but still feels like it's on a stage. Running through this film is an incredible racial tensity that, although may not be as poignant as it is in Netflix's Spike Lee movie, it's still powerful nonetheless. This is a very easygoing and fun to watch movie, but I think it's worth watching if only for the fantastic performances. At 29, we have Crip Camp: A Disability Revolution, directed by Nicole Newman and James Lebrecht. One of Netflix's more overlooked documentaries, Crip Camp is a powerful, emotional and very important experience. Starting at a summer camp for disabled teens, this film focuses on a group of disabled people who became activists and fought for the passing of the disability rights movement as well as accessibility legislation. The film does an incredible job of capturing the spirit of a revolution, painting the anger and frustration in an incredibly powerful light. Spending the first half of the film introducing us to the activists and their experiences at summer camp together and the freedom and joy that they felt makes the emotional realization of their lack of equal rights hit even harder. The message of the film is constantly inspiring and powerful, showing the fight that these people had to go through just to not be discriminated against and receive the help that they need. Obviously, we have grown up being taught constantly about the civil rights movement, but it's important that we are told about other parts of equal rights history, and this film displays a part that seems to be completely brushed aside in the grand schemes of history. This is one of the few films on the list that I would highly recommend everyone checks out because it's very powerful. It's on Netflix, and Netflix themselves even uploaded the entire thing to YouTube for free. It's only an hour 48 minutes long, so if you're looking for something to watch while in lockdown that will make you feel something, look no further. At number 28, we have The Devil All the Time, directed by Antonio Campos. Okay, so this is the last Netflix original film on the list, at least until number 25. The Devil All the Time, based off the book of the same name, is an epic crime thriller set over roughly 25 years. The film focuses on a group of different people who are corrupted by religion in different ways. The film is a complete descent into madness that is filled with sex and violence. The whole film feels feels dirty and greased up. A large part of the film focuses on violence and trauma and how it's passed down through generations, and I think Campos does a great job of portraying that. This film is definitely not completely unique, and there are moments where the film does kind of feel like this weird blending of The Tree of Life and There Will Be Blood if it was written and directed by Tarantino, but it's incredibly enjoyable nonetheless. Although I do think some of the story parts lack focus, what keeps the film constantly enjoyable for me are the performances, all of which are really great. The film has a pretty insane cast comprising of Tom Holland, Bill Skarsgård, Riley Coe, Jason Clarke, Sebastian Stan, Harry Melling, Mia Wasikowska, Robert Pattinson, and Eliza Scanlon, star of the next film on the list. Every actor does a great job in the film, creating these great larger-than-life characters. Campos is clearly an incredibly talented director when it comes to dealing with actors, and he gets great performances out of everyone. The film is definitely messy at points, and I wouldn't recommend it to everyone, but I found it to be entertaining in a very twisted and lurid way. At 27, we have Baby Teeth, directed by Shannon Murphy. Baby Teeth is an Australian coming-of-age movie starring Eliza Scanlon, probably best known for her role in Little Women and The Devil All the Time, which I just mentioned. In the film, Scanlon plays a 16-year-old girl called Mila who is terminally ill. After spending a fairly sheltered and normal life, she falls in love with a guy called Moses, a drug dealer who constantly gets her into trouble. The film focuses on the recklessness of their relationship as well as the way it impacts her parents whose marriage is in a pretty bad place. The film definitely has an incredibly anarchic feel with its constantly off-kilter and darkly comedic tone. However, at the same time it's delicate, powerful, and very raw. Murphy does a great job of combining juxtaposing styles and emotions. There are moments where this film is a hilarious indie comedy, moments where it's a wholesome love story, and moments where it's a heartbreaking family drama. It's a very stark and honest film with its depictions of love, loss, addiction, and dysfunction. And to top it all off, the film is filled with incredible performances from Eliza Scanlon, Ben Mendelsohn, Ezzie Davis, and Toby Wallace, all of whom deliver stellar performances. This is a really unique, heartwarming, yet simultaneously heartbreaking movie that I cannot recommend enough. At 26, we have Last and First Men, directed by Johan Johansson. Composer Johan Johansson's only directorial work in his lifetime, Last and First Men is an experimental movie unlike any I've ever seen. The film started as a multimedia performance before being turned into a proper film last year. The film is made up of a tense, beautiful score, black and white 16mm footage of memorial sculptures in the former Republic of Yugoslavia, as well as narration from Tilda Swinton. The narration shows her reading an adaptation of Olaf Stapledon's novel of the same name. Tilda Swinton basically plays the disembodied voice of an evolved human in 2 billion years' time, chronicling their evolution as well as explaining what is causing their close demise and how past generations can solve this. It's a very beautiful and unique movie, but it's also one that is basically impossible to discuss. It's incredibly methodical, intimate, and simple. It's 70 minutes of not really anything going on at all, and because of that I can imagine it being a very hard film for some people to get through, but this is one of the most interesting and unique movies I saw all year. I thought leaving it off this list would definitely have been a mistake. At number 25 we have Mank, directed by David Fincher. David Fincher is one of my favourite directors, so I was incredibly excited for Mank, his first film in 6 years as well as his first film for Netflix. The film has basically been in development hell since the late 90s before finally coming to fruition now. Written by his father Jack Fincher, the film is a biography of Herman J. Mankiewicz and shows him developing the screenplay for Citizen Kane. The film is a great biography as well as a great love letter to Citizen Kane and classic Hollywood generally. The film perfectly displays the glamour and corruption of old Hollywood in a way that is constantly captivating and interesting. To help the authenticity of the film, it's intentionally made to feel like it's a film made in the late 30s. The film is in black and white, the audio is all mono and sounds incredibly rough, and the dialogue is very representative of movies from that era. But I think Fincher does a great job of crafting something that stands as its own experience rather than just feeling like a homage. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's scores sees them coming out of their comfort zone to compose something that sounds period authentic and like a classic Hollywood score. And although I don't think their score is as great as some of their others, it feels very very fitting in the world that Fincher is creating. There are definitely issues I have with the movie, a few visual moments that look off due to the differences in digital cameras versus classic film cameras, but apart from that, this is an incredibly funny and entertaining, meticulous love letter to Hollywood. In a lot of ways, both thematically and due to the nature of its plot, I think this film is the perfect companion piece to Citizen Kane. At 24, we have The Wolf of Snow Hollow, directed by Jim Cummings. Jim Cummings' previous movie Thunder Road was one of my favourite films of 2019, so it's only fitting that his follow-up would similarly deliver. While Thunder Road was a dark comedy drama, this film is a dark comedy horror. There are still a lot of thematic similarities between the two, and in a lot of ways this film is kind of like Thunder Road's strange sibling. Cummings' deadpan humour fits the dark tone of the film really well, and it creates something that perfectly understands how to balance horror and comedy. The horror side of the film probably could have been a little bit fleshed out more, but I found it incredibly rewarding, capturing the feeling of a slasher movie and blending elements of a classic monster movie in as well. Much of the film feels like Fargo blended in with An American Werewolf in London. The cold, snowy setting fits the film's icy tone perfectly. Visually, I think there are some really creative and quirky shots that I really do appreciate, but at its core, I really like that the film just is never afraid to take risks. Cummings is constantly throwing comedy, drama, and horror at you, unafraid of whether it all coherently works, and although some of it doesn't, the confidence he displays keeps the film constantly entertaining. The performances are great throughout, especially Cummings himself, who once again delivers an incredibly witty yet emotionally powerful performance. Robert Forster is also good in his sadly brief role. This was his final film, and although not one of his best, it's good to see him go out on something as good as this. I definitely do still prefer Thunder Road, but this is still a really great movie, one of the best horror movies of the year. At 23, we have Wolfwalkers, directed by Tom Moore and Ross Stewart. I quite liked Cartoon Saloon's film Song of the Sea, so I've been very interested in checking out their other movies. So after hearing the hype about this film, I was very excited to check it out. And then Apple TV decided to buy the rights to it, so I had to get a trial subscription so I could watch it. Quick side note, Apple TV Plus is a terrible service. I watched a few films on there and they constantly kept crashing for me, and I would restart the film and it would like put me 20 minutes behind where I actually was, and it wouldn't let me fast forward, so I'd have to go like frame by frame at one point just to skip 20 minutes back where it was. It's so broken, and to be honest, there's not really a lot of great stuff on there. I'd recommend maybe getting a trial for this and another movie on the list, but apart from that, it's basically devoid of content and barely works, and to be honest, you didn't hear it from me, but these films are very easy to find on torrent websites and pirate websites. Anyway, Wolfwalkers. This film is the third in director Tom Moore's Irish folklore trilogy. It's an animated movie set in 1650 Ireland. Here people believe wolves to be demonic and have to be wiped out. A young aspiring hunter goes to hunt a group of wolves when she meets a wild native girl. The two become friends as she discovers the world of wolfwalkers, people who can turn into wolves. So she has a change of heart and has to convince the rest of the town that wolves are actually good. The plot is not super original. There are definite comparisons that could be made with How to Train Your Dragon and other films in that vein, but the execution is so well done that it never becomes an issue. The animation is incredibly stylish and well detailed, and the voice work is all fantastic. Cartoon Saloon shows constant visual influences from all over the place and uses them effectively to create a very adventurous fantasy world. There is incredible heart and passion shown all throughout this movie, and it's a constant treat as an animation fan. Sadly, 2020 was pretty devoid when it comes to animated movies, but this was definitely one of the best. I'm glad to see Cartoon Saloon really showing off the potential that they have, and I cannot wait for whatever they do next. At 22, we have A Hidden Life, directed by Terrence Malick. After loving Days of Heaven and A Tree of Life, which was one of my favourite films of the 2010s, I've really wanted to get into more of Terrence Malick's work, so I was glad to see his newest film, A Hidden Life, in the cinema. A lot of people seem to be very mixed on his post Tree of Life work, so I was very hesitant, but the film is kind of exactly what I expected and hoped it would be. The film is based on the true story of an Austrian farmer who refused to fight for the Nazis in World War II and ended up facing a lot of backlash from people in his village as well as the Nazis themselves. From this plot alone, I'm sure you'd expect an exciting war drama, but that's really not what you get at all. Similar to all of Malick's work, this is an incredibly slow and poetic film. The first hour of the 3-hour film basically just comprises of shots of farming, and although the argument can be made as very slow, in fact I would probably agree that there are a few parts that could have been cut down, in fact quite a lot of bits that could have been cut down, the film is constantly beautiful. The cinematography is gorgeous and every shot looks so meticulously framed and executed. The music, although nothing flashy, helps add extreme mood. The acting is all great, with August Dill especially giving a great understated performance, and the writing is just as deep and poetic as you'd expect from Malick. Much of the film is made up of shots of farming or menial tasks with characters reciting what is basically poetry. This is definitely not going to be everyone's thing. If you're not a fan of Malick, then it's very unlikely this film would convert you, but if you like his spiritual style, then I highly recommend this movie. There's also a large group of people out there who only like The Thin Red Line, and this film does remind me a lot of that, and how it starts off incredibly slow and kind of picks up halfway through. So if you liked that film, then yeah, A Hidden Life is kind of a very similar film in some ways. At 21, we have The Beastie Boys story, directed by Spike Jonze. The idea of a Beastie Boys documentary directed by Spike Jonze instantly intrigued me. Along with Wolf Walkers, it was one of the handful of films that made me want to get an Apple TV trial, and what a great experience this film was. Not watching on Apple TV Plus, it crashed like a dozen times. Rather than being just a standard music documentary like we've seen done millions of times, Spike Jonze really shook up the formula here. In this documentary, we see the surviving members of the Beastie Boys performing a live show in which they tell the band's story in front of a large screen that shows archive footage and music videos. It's a very unique framing device, and it creates something very interesting to watch. Similar to many music documentaries, your enjoyment of this film really depends on your enjoyment of the band. Although there's a very interesting story to be told and a lot of really funny anecdotes all throughout, the core of this movie surrounds the Beastie Boys. Having the two members tell the story of their career creates a clear bias in favour of the band, so I don't think you'd be able to go into the film not liking the band at all and be able to enjoy it. But I personally really loved the whole experience. As a big fan of the Beastie Boys, it was a lot of fun getting to see these guys passionately tell their story with a clear amount of pride for what they've done. If you're a fan of Beastie Boys, then this film is a kind of a no-brainer, but you know, fuck Apple TV Plus. I'm not saying you should pirate it and refuse to support Apple, but you know, it's an option. I'm not condoning it, but it's something that you can do. Yeah. At 20, we have David Byrne's American Utopia, directed by Spike Lee. Director Spike Lee perfectly managed to translate David Byrne's Broadway show into an exciting, entertaining and heartwarming concert film. As a huge Talking Heads fan, I was looking forward to this film so much, and getting to watch it through the London Film Festival's online screening was a great experience. Just as the Talking Heads concert film Stop Making Sense did 36 years ago, this film brings the music to life with such vibrancy and joy. Watching this film, you not only feel like you're in the front row of the audience, you feel like you're on stage with the band. You feel like you're a part of this beautifully entertaining celebration of life. While much of Talking Heads music feels like an outsider nervously looking in on human nature and failing to comprehend it, in this show David Byrne kind of takes these songs around and inverts it, making it sound like an outsider looking in on human nature and loving everything he sees. The song choices are all incredible, and the band do fantastic renditions of classic Talking Heads songs as well as the best of David Byrne's solo career. Visually, the film is incredible. There are moments where Spike Lee takes the cameras into places that you wouldn't have gotten to see if you were in the audience of the show. There are moments where the cameras are above the band, moments where the cameras follow David Byrne as he walks onto and off stage. The American Utopia film is a funny, heartwarming experience that is the perfect escapist film to take your mind off the dystopian world it appears we live in. At 19, we have Jojo Rabbit, directed by Taika Waititi. Taika Waititi has had an incredibly unique and exciting career, going from indie darling to directing not just a Marvel movie, but an Oscar-winning satirical drama. Jojo Rabbit is brave and irreverent and full of undeniable charm. His themes of anti-hate and love resonate deeply throughout throughout the film, throughout his laugh out loud moments of comedy as well as more emotional dramatic moments. The film follows a Hitler Youth member called Jojo in World War II who discovers that his mother has a Jewish girl hiding in their house. This leads Jojo to question his beliefs as he starts to grow a connection to this girl. It's a film filled with heart and emotion. Taika does an incredible job of crafting a film that can make you laugh uncontrollably and then cry in the next scene. And beyond the fantastic screenplay and direction, the film succeeds in so many other ways. The visual style and production value is all great, and the film is constantly a treat to look at. And of course, the performances from everyone are fantastic. Roman Griffin Davis and Thomasin McKenzie are both fantastic in their respective roles, with Roman Griffin Davis giving one of the best performances from a child actor I've seen since Room. But the supporting cast are all equally hilarious and well performed also. Scarlett Johansson does a fantastic job as Jojo's mother, Alfie Allen, Sam Rockwell, and surprisingly Rebel Wilson are all hilarious as leaders of the Hitler Youth group, and Taika Waititi plays Jojo's imaginary friend Hitler in one of the boldest and funniest pieces of Nazi satire I've ever seen. While I don't love this as much as What We Do in the Shadows, I do think this is one of Taika's best movies, and I'm so excited to see what he does next. At 18, we have Clemency, directed by Chinonye Chukwu. This is not a happy movie at all. In fact, this may be the most dark and miserable movie I saw all year, which says a lot because A Hidden Life was such a heavy movie, but it's a really great one still. The film sees Alfre Woodard, who plays a prison warden who is preparing to execute an inmate. The psychological and emotional weight caused by the job starts to pile up on her, leading her to connect to the man who she's sanctioned to kill, who is very possibly innocent. The film explores the serious nature of death and the death penalty and displays the true darkness of it. The system gets so caught up in sentencing criminals to death that they forget at the end of the day they're human beings, and this is something that the film explores incredibly well. The deep emotional toll that it has on the people who execute these orders. Alfre Woodard gives one of the year's best performances, managing perfectly to capture the complexity of her character and the split nature of her psyche. Aldous Hodge, who plays the inmate sentenced to die, is equally as great. This film is definitely a slow burner and it's constantly hard to watch. There are many moments that are painfully emotional and other moments that are pretty disturbing. It's a very bleak movie, so definitely not one I'd recommend to people in a terrible place already, but it's a constantly powerful, well-crafted drama which remains one of the most powerful and harrowing movie experiences I've had all year. I don't really understand why it's getting such mixed reception because I think this film is really great. At 17, we have Les Miserables, directed by Ladj Ly. Despite sharing the title, this film is not based off their Victor Hugo novel and has nothing to do with the musical, although it does have thematic similarities, not to mention it's partially set in Montfermeil where the novel was written. Les Miserables is a film about a cop who on his first day in a new commune discovers the disparity between the police and the poorer, mostly black community. It's a film about police brutality and systematic racism, and it's an incredibly hard-hitting one. The film has an incredibly infectious energy, constantly building up to its action-filled climax, but the film is consistently powerful and displays the division between poor and police in a deeply moving way. It's incredibly well shot and the acting from everyone is great, especially Damien Bonnard, who I really loved in the movie. But what I think makes it such an interesting film is its constantly skewed morality. The film justifies the actions of both groups at many points, allowing you as the audience to pick sides. There is no black or white, good or evil in this movie like you would expect there to be, but that makes it constantly interesting and tense. The film is partially based on a real-life occurrence of police violence in the city in 2008 that Ly saw and filmed. His own legal troubles make it seem like he really understands the system and the life of the poorer people in the commune, which makes his non-biased stance throughout incredibly impressive. The realism presented all throughout makes this film even more powerful. It's an angry, passionate, and constantly interesting movie. I was going to see it in the cinema when it was out, but changed my mind at the last second and instead ended up watching it on Netflix when it was released a couple weeks ago, and I definitely regret doing so because I think this film would have definitely worked better on a big screen, but regardless, I love this film a lot and I cannot recommend it enough. At 16 we have And Then We Dance, directed by Lee Van Aken. This is a film that I just happened to stumble across on the BFI player back in December of last year. The reviews seemed pretty good, but I really wasn't sure what to expect, and I went in kind of not really knowing the plot at all, so I was very happy to get a film as beautiful and powerful as this. This is a film about a dancer in Georgia whose life is turned upside down when he falls in love with a fellow dancer. It's a film filled with love and compassion, focusing on a place that is pretty backwards in terms of tolerance and acceptance. It's a film constantly filled with grace and life while still managing to remain at times heartbreaking and moving. Visually, the film looks fantastic and adds a subtle and tender look. Leevanjel Bakani is really great in the film, and there's never a point where you don't feel the emotion he feels through discrimination. The film uses dancing incredibly effectively as not just a story device but as a means of expressing emotion. There are multiple dance sequences in the film that have a huge impact on the characters' journeys, and it creates something constantly powerful. The film is very gripping, warm and poignant. It also gets extra points because the main character has the same Spirited Away poster that I have in my room. At 15 we have the Small Axe films, directed by Steve McQueen. I thought about picking just one of the recent Small Axe movies for this list, but every single one is worthy of mention in its own right, so I thought instead I would just put the entire project here. Small Axe is a series of 5 completely different movies directed by Steve McQueen, which tells the stories of West Indian immigrants in London during the 60s and 70s. All of the films focus on discrimination and racism in a completely different way, whether it's through criminal injustice in Mangrove and Red, White and Blue, or in a much more subtle social way in Lovers Rock. Each film features fantastic directing, acting and writing. Although I'm not really a huge fan of Alex Wheatle, I loved every other film in the anthology for completely different ways. Mangrove is a really powerful courtroom drama with some of the best acting of the year. It's a great depiction of community and institutional racism, which puts the trial of the Chicago 7, released around the same time, to complete shame. Lovers Rock, my favourite of the series, displays an incredibly wholesome display of unity and love. It's a loving ode to life and self-expression. Red, White and Blue is the most urgent and angry film in the series, showing the corrupt, bigoted nature of the police force at this time. John Boyega delivers the best performance of his career, and hopefully it's a sign of what's to come from his post-Star Wars career. And the final film, Education, is a heartbreaking film about racism in the school system. It's the simplest film in the series and also the shortest, clocking in at only 63 minutes long, but it feels natural and is still just as powerful as ever. Steve McQueen is one of the best directors around, and we were incredibly lucky to get 5 new films from him this year. Even the weakest film in this series is worth watching, and the same can be said for literally his entire career so far. At 14 we have Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, directed by Eliza Hittman. An incredibly quiet, awkward and claustrophobic movie. This isn't an easy watch, and the attention to detail and realism presented throughout makes it feel like a display of real life. The film follows a pair of girls who have to travel to New York to get an abortion, as the place where they live requires parental consent. So yeah, a happy film. The film succeeds through its understated, subtle flow, something that I think will put people off looking for an emotionally hard-hitting drama. It's a film lacking huge emotional set pieces, but it's a sensitive and graceful experience. Hittman perfectly captures the feeling of being lost, being in a huge city at night that you barely know, wandering around trying to find something. It's a film that's filled with subtle and sparse despair. Hittman's directing and writing both capture this feeling perfectly, constantly feeling natural and real instead of favouring emotional freakouts like I think lesser writers or directors would. Sidney Flanagan's performance as the lead perfectly captures this, constantly feeling honest and introverted. This is definitely not something I'd recommend to everyone. It's very slow and sparse, and there isn't really a climax at all, but to those who think this sounds interesting, I cannot recommend it enough, as it's one of the most powerful films of the year. can't wait to watch the rest of Hickman's filmography, and I look forward to what she does next. At number 13 we have Saint Maud, directed by Rose Glass. We have been absolutely spoiled over the last few years when it comes to debut horror movies. Saint Maud was not only one of the best horror movies of last year, but one of the most disturbing movies I've seen in the last decade. The film constantly found a way to get under my skin and make me feel uncomfortable, as the best horror movies do. The film features a nurse who, after accidentally killing a past patient, becomes a devout Christian. She becomes a personal carer for her hedonistic dancer who is sick and frail. However, slowly she begins to unravel as her dark past haunts her, and she begins to believe that she has a personal, physical connection with God. The film reminds me a lot of First Reform in how it deals with faith and the way it can drive people insane. It's a really great psychological film that starts incredibly slow before massively amping up towards the end and basically just becoming batshit insane. Writer-director Rose Glass expertly builds tension throughout, creating an incredibly dark, immersive atmosphere. Morfydd Clark delivers one of the year's best performances as the title character. Visually, the film has a very classy yet dark look. The film is a real treat for horror fans looking for something slower and more psychological. This was a lot of fun and incredibly terrifying, and I cannot wait to rewatch it. Although there are a few images in the film that are traumatizing to me, and I am kind of not looking forward to having to go through again. At 12 we have The Climb, directed by Michelangelo Covino. I was incredibly excited for this movie, having heard nothing but praise for it, and it didn't disappoint in the slightest. This film is about a friendship between two guys over a few years and the ups and downs that it takes. Writers Michelangelo Covino and Carl Marvin also star in the film, making it feel deeply personal. The duo took their short film and basically just expanded upon it. It's made up of 7 chapters showing the characters at different points in their lives and the way their friendship affects it. Much of the humor is very dark and at times dry, but it all works incredibly well. This is the funniest movie of the year, and I was constantly laughing out loud. Covino and Marvin are both incredibly talented writers and actors. Both of them deliver fantastic performances, especially Marvin, who in my opinion steals the show. Each chapter features very minimal cuts, mostly comprising of long one takes, something that I think helps make the film feel so much more natural and urgent. But at its core, what keeps the film so constantly engaging is the friendship and the way it's delivered. This is in my opinion the most realistic depiction of male friendship I've ever seen in a film. It's constantly gripping, funny, heartwarming, and very touching. This is one that I think absolutely everyone should watch. At number 11 we have White Riot, directed by Rubika Shah. White Riot is an incredible documentary that focuses on the Rock Against Racism movement in the 1970s. It's a great example of the power that punk rock has and the impact it had on the UK, and not just changing the musical scene but also changing the political scene. It brings to light the backwards and racist nature of British politics, especially back in the late 70s, although it's not really much better now, and it's presented in an incredibly powerful, interesting and entertaining way. At its core, although this is a film primarily about politics, it never forgets that music is also a strong part of its identity. There is a lot of archive footage of bands like The Clash and X-Ray Spex who played a big part in the movement. Rubika Shah does a great job of blending the modern with the old to inform the audience that although the movement was technically successful, the battle is still not completely won. There are a lot of parallels between the racism presented through the National Front and modern groups like the EDL, and because of that it feels very appropriate for this documentary to be made now. If you're at all interested in punk or even the history of British politics, then I cannot recommend this enough. It's fascinating and feels constantly current. Not to mention the archive footage of bands like The Clash is something that fans will love. At number 10 we have System Crasher, directed by Nora Fingscheidt. Nora Fingscheidt's debut feature is one of the most moving and disturbing dramas I saw all year. The film is about a young girl who suffers from violent ADHD. Because of this, her mothers can't take care of her, leading her to being moved around to different care homes while her carers struggle to find a place for her. This is not a film that's easy to watch. Many moments are filled with despair, and despite the glimmers of hope, the film's realistic take on child welfare constantly hits incredibly hard. The film has an, at times, very anarchic feel which complements the lead character's mental and emotional state. There are multiple scenes scenes where she goes insane and the camera is shaking all over the place trying to keep up with her, and it really puts us in the shoes of the people trying to help her. The music also complements this with its bright yet rebellious tone, which sounds like a blending of a CBBC show with a punk song. Although the film could have easily been really cliched in its portrayal of troubled children and the social workers that look after them, I think this film feels incredibly close to reality. The characters all feel incredibly real in how they interact and how the film's events have this deep emotional impact on them. The performances are all really great, and Helena Zengel gives one of the best child performances I have ever seen. This is a very powerful and sad movie, but one that I really love. It's on Netflix in America, and in the UK it's currently on BFI Player, so I say go check it out if you can. And number 9 we have Feels Good Man, directed by Arthur Jones. I definitely never expected a documentary about a comic character turned meme to be so incredibly interesting, but Feels Good Man was the most fascinating documentary I saw all year. This film tells the story of Pepe the Frog and how it went from being an indie comic character to becoming a symbol of hate. The film takes a sympathetic look at its creator, who just wanted to create a wholesome comic before having it used as a symbol of a radical political movement. But it's also a documentary about the internet and the freedom it grants its users and content creators. It's a fascinating story that is presented in an equally fascinating way. The film blends interviews, television footage, as well as original animation together to create something that is constantly enjoyable and never boring. This film does a great job of being more than just a film about a meme, and among all things, this is an anti-hate movie. A movie that is clearly strongly against the alt-right and Donald Trump in a way that works incredibly well. Despite being a clearly biased political movie, its bias feels completely necessary. It's an incredibly interesting, funny, and impressively presented documentary. At 8 we have St. Francis, directed by Alex Thompson. It's weird for a film that features subplots about abortion and postpartum depression to be quite as charming and funny as this is. This is a very simple movie, but is one that succeeds through the fantastic script and really great acting. The film does a great job of being able to make you laugh and make you cry in a short period of time. The emotional humor is incredibly strong throughout. Lead actress Kelly O'Sullivan is fantastic in the lead role. She also wrote the script, which is similarly great. This is a film that deals with a lot of hot issues like femininity, abortion, sexual orientation, and raising children in a gay household, and it manages to tackle them incredibly well, crafting a film that is full of heart and feels constantly personal. Kelly O'Sullivan feels so natural in the lead role that it feels like she's drawing from her own life. There's also some great child acting in this film also. It's weird that there's been so many films this year with great child performances. There is a lot in this film about the female experience and how bearing children or having an abortion impacts their emotions and mental health. And because of this, despite me loving this film, it was never going to resonate as deeply as it would with a woman who has gone through these similar experiences. But as an outsider, I still found this to be a constantly funny, heartwarming, and emotionally powerful experience. At number 7 we have The Lighthouse, directed by Robert Eggers. The fact that The Lighthouse was such a huge hit is kind of baffling in a way. It seemed like everyone was excited for this film at one point, and I saw the trailer being shared everywhere, so as soon as it got a UK release, I had to go see it. I even ended up having to travel 13 miles to see it, as our local cinema decided to show it like 2 or 3 weeks late for some reason. I'm a huge fan of Robert Eggers' film The Witch. Eggers focuses heavier on the psychological themes of that film while adding surreality and absurdist humor to create an incredibly strange yet unique experience. This film is made to look like it was made in the early 20th century, and it creates a very unique looking movie. It's in black and white, the aspect ratio is almost perfectly square, and the audio is all one mono channel. The attention to detail to make the film look like this was ridiculous, and watching the behind the scenes of the film, it's incredible seeing how much work went into crafting this experience. The whole film is a two-man piece between Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, and both of them deliver two of the best performances of the year. The sound design of the film reminds me a lot of early David Lynch and how crowded, windy, and relentless it is. There is constantly chaos and tension created from the sounds, and it creates something even more unnerving and anxious. Eggers' script is made up of dialogue written to sound like it's from the 1890s, and it works incredibly well. All of these pieces come together to create one of the most unique, creepy, and insane film watching experiences you'll ever have. At number 6 we have Uncut Gems, directed by the Safdie brothers. I love the Safdie brothers, and their most recent film Uncut Gems is one of their best movies to date. While their previous work felt very small and grounded, this film shows them expanding that claustrophobic style into a film that feels huge. Clearly inspired by Scorsese crime movies, this is an incredibly chaotic, tense and anxious thriller that is unrelenting until the very end. There's constantly stuff building up, and it creates a film that is overwhelming to say the least. Adam Sandler is incredible in the lead role, delivering a career best performance and proving that with the right material he is a great actor. Please Sandler, more of this and Punch Drunk Love and less Hubie Halloween. The script is constantly witty and hilarious, and I think it encapsulates everything that the Safdies do well as writers. Eno Point Never's score is very similar to the score that he did for Good Time but on crack. It's an 80s synthwave inspired score that constantly builds discomfort and drowns out the dialogue. It's possibly my favourite score of the year. This is both a great character study but also a great exercise in stress and anxiety. Even in the film's slower moments, you're constantly on edge, leading to one of the best climaxes I've seen in a film since Whiplash. While I'm glad this film got a Netflix release, meaning that more people get to see it than they would have otherwise, experiencing this film in the cinema was one of the best experiences I've ever had watching a film in the cinema. We watched it in a small art house cinema near Brighton, and everyone left the screen shaking. It's such a shame that not everyone got to experience the film this same way. Either way, this film is an energetic, exciting and chaotic thriller with great writing, acting and music. If you want the cinematic experience of being in a high-speed police chase, then I highly recommend watching this. And number 5, we have I'm Thinking of Ending Things, directed by Charlie Kaufman. Charlie Kaufman is quite possibly my favourite screenwriter of all time. The transition he has made to director have been incredible, and all 3 of the films he's directed have been fantastic. Anomalisa especially, which is quite possibly a top 10 all-time favourite for me. I'm Thinking of Ending Things is undoubtedly Kaufman's least linear and most experimental film to date, and honestly I'm not really sure I've seen the film enough times to get the full experience, but I still deeply appreciate the technical qualities of the film. Visually, this is the best looking of all of Kaufman's films. It feels like he's really honed in a unique style here, and it looks incredible. The warm colours, the tight aspect ratio and creative shot compositions are all fantastic. Every single character is great, and Kaufman does a great job of creating these really interesting, quirky and captivating characters. Kaufman's writing is great and has this super bizarre nature to the whole film experience. There are clearly a lot of deep topics and themes displayed all throughout, and the film at times is incredibly heartbreaking to watch. Large portions of the film are just based around Jesse Plemons and Jessie Buckley talking in a car, and these sequences do a great job of remaining interesting and never slow or dull. Hearing them break into a random debate about a woman under the influence was something that the first time around I wasn't too sure on, but the second time around clicked with me, and that's something that I can say for most of this film. I don't understand everything Kaufman presents, but with every viewing I grow my own understanding of it. I could be completely wrong, but that's the magic of non-linear surreal movies like this. Everyone's entitled to their own interpretation. This is a film I can definitely see myself watching again in the near future and breaking down even more. It's a fascinating, engaging and beautifully sad experience, and one of Kaufman's best to date. And number 4, we have Waves, directed by Trey Edward Schultz. Call me a normie, but I wasn't as in love with It Comes at Night as I think a lot of people were. I'm willing to re-watch it, but personally, despite getting a lot out of it, I didn't think it was amazing. I was kind of more in the mainstream crowd of people who didn't really get it that much, although I am definitely still a bigger fan than most people apparently. Schultz's follow-up Waves, however, is incredible. This is one of the most emotionally impactful movies of the entire year. Waves is definitely a messy film, but completely by design. Schultz does an incredible job of presenting the messiness of family and relationships and the ripple effect that people's actions have on everyone around them. It's a film made up of 2 completely different halves, one a chaotic, tense drama, and the other one a slower, more somber, romantic half. And although I completely understand how one could prefer the first half to the second, I think for the film to be as good as it is, each half has to be there. In the final moments of the film, the pieces all come together and the purpose of each half becomes incredibly clear, and it leads to some of the most heartbreaking filmmaking I've seen all year. Visually, the film is stunning and incredibly creative, using a wide range of different aspect ratios to display the characters' emotions in a similar way that Xavier Dolan's Mummy did. And the soundtrack in many ways is a character of its own. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's score is pulse-pounding but very subtle, and the usage of licensed music is some of the best I've ever heard in a film. Animal Collective, Tame Impala, Frank Ocean, A$AP Rocky, Kendrick Lamar, Tyler the Creator, Amy Winehouse, Kanye West, Kid Cudi, Chance the Rapper, Alabama Shakes, and Radiohead are all among the musicians who play in the film, and Schultz does an incredible job at presenting these songs in moments that are incredibly impactful. The usage of I Am a God by Kanye West is one of the most exciting, intense moments in any film this year, while the usage of True Love Waits by Radiohead at the end is possibly the most heartbreaking and sad moment of any film this year. This is a film that is ambitious and confident but consistently powerful. The creativity and ambition reminds me a lot of what Paul Thomas Anderson did with his epic Magnolia. This is a beautiful, heartbreaking and harrowing movie, and I cannot wait to rewatch it. Although, just a side note, fuck Universal Pictures for not giving it a DVD or Blu-ray release in the UK. I refuse to buy a digital copy of the film when at any point it could just be taken away from me. I ended up having to pay to import it from America, but for a film as acclaimed and popular as this is, I shouldn't have to do that. It seems like the same thing is going to happen with The Climb, and it's just such a shame to see studios stepping away from physical media, because although it may not be as popular as it was before, it's the only way we can actually own a film. And number 3, we have Soul, directed by Pete Docter. I have a lot of love for pre-2010s Pixar. Those early films are all pretty great, but the 2010s were really rough for them, comprising of unoriginal ideas and pretty average at best sequels. Apart from Coco and the Toy Story sequels at a push, there wasn't really anything good from Pixar all decade, and after Onward this year, there were no signs of them improving for me. But weirdly, their second film of 2020, if for some reason they put out 2 films in 2020, Soul was not only a good movie, but the best movie they've done in over a decade. Similar to Inside Out, this film tackles existentialism and life in a very creative way. However, unlike that film which trivialized these deep topics and cheaply tackled them, this film is an incredibly deep, heartfelt and powerful movie. This is a film about cherishing the smaller parts of life and the world that we overlook, and how once we all die, we'll regret not doing so. It tackles life and death in an incredibly mature and inventive way. There is a surprising amount of abstract imagery which blends perfectly with their exaggerated cartoon designs. The sequences in The Great Beyond and The Great Before are some of the most creative and interesting ideas I've ever seen presented in a Pixar movie. They feel more at home in a Don Hertzfeldt movie. The animation is spectacular all throughout and is possibly the best looking 3D animated movie I've ever seen. The insane attention to detail in every frame is ridiculous, and there are multiple parts that just genuinely looked real. I constantly forgot that I was watching an animated movie because everything felt so natural and lifelike, and that's just a true testament to the talent that Pixar's animators have. Even their worst movies look great, and this is probably the best looking to date, and it's one that I think will stand the test of time. The voice acting is all great as well, with Jamie Foxx delivering a performance that never just sounded like a celebrity talking through a cartoon character. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's score is incredible, blending their signature glitchy electronic music with jazz and big band music in an exciting, inventive and very fitting way. If you're a fan of animation, Pixar, or you're just generally having a bad time at the moment, then Soul is the perfect film for you. And number 2, we have Portrait of a Lady on Fire, directed by Celine Sciamma. This is one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen in my entire life. Every frame of this film looks like a painting. The story is so filled with heart and emotion. Everything about it is pure beauty. The film focuses on 2 women as they become friends friends and fall in love. It's one of the most heartwarming yet emotional love stories I've seen in a film in the last decade. Watching these two characters nervously touch or poetically talk about how they feel brings me to tears every time. It's a very slow film, but nothing ever feels unnecessary. Sciamma uses every second to develop the story, characters, and the emotions of the movie perfectly. The performances from Naomi Merlin and Adele Haenel are both fantastic, and their relationship feels so real and natural, possibly more so than any movie I've ever seen. Much of the film is silent, but Sciamma uses music in a few scenes to an incredible effect, and the final scene especially is one of the best uses of music I've ever seen in a film. The whole film has this really ethereal quality to it, constantly feeling like a dream. It depicts the feeling of love better than any film I've ever seen. Despite the simplicity of this film, it still somehow manages to be one of the most powerful films of the past decade. Everything in it feels like poetry. Visually and audibly, this film is poetic, passionate, and genuine. I really don't know what else I can say about the film except go watch it. It's an incredible experience that I love more every time I watch it. And my number one film of 2020 is Parasite, directed by Bong Joon-ho. In 2020, I got heavily into Korean movies, and this film is to thank for that. This was actually the first Korean movie I ever watched, and what a film to start with. Bong Joon-ho is an incredibly talented director, and from what I've seen of his work, this was quite possibly not only his best film to date, but one of the best Korean movies I've ever seen. Bong tackles class division in an incredibly hilarious and thrilling way, constantly blending together different genres into a film that is completely original and unlike anything else I've ever seen. Watching this film is an emotional roller coaster, taking you in multiple directions while remaining thrilling right until the end. The film is incredibly paced, switching from fast paced to slow and tense. Bong is a master of suspense, and this film displays that perfectly, slowly revealing parts of the plot throughout, leading to one of the most shocking and disturbing final acts I've seen in a long time. Bong's tackling of class is deeply rooted in the film, in many ways both subtly and completely obviously. It's incredible to see the number of layers clearly presented when you rewatch it. The characters are all entertaining to watch, and each of them are incredibly sympathetic even when they do questionable things. Bong does a fantastic job at crafting a film with no heroes or villains and making everyone equal, displaying that even despite the differences in class, each person is still a human being. Visually, this film looks great, and the set design of the Park's house looks incredible. In a lot of ways, this film actually reminds me of Jordan Peele's film Us, except I don't think that film manages to tackle these topics anywhere near as good. The dark satire in this film is incredibly powerful and hilarious, and it creates a film that is constantly engaging, exciting, funny, and just all around entertaining. This has quite honestly become one of my favourite films of all time already, and I cannot wait to rewatch it over and over for years to come. And there we go, 2020 is finally over and done with. I'm sorry this video has taken so long to make, but I'm incredibly glad to get it over and done with now. Let me know what you think of the list and if there's anything that you would add that wasn't on here, and I'll see you next time.